Because God doesn't do it again. And I don't mean He can't do it again. But Jesus doesn't say, let's go to the other side and then part the waters. So the practice of moving through life waiting for the miraculous doesn't really build us up. It makes us manna dependent. And did you know manna dependent Christianity is not God's ultimate design for you? I've got just enough to make it today. I've got just enough to make it today. I got just enough to make it today. That's a season. You can live there for a season, but that's not the promised land. You see, every day of their life, God put manna in front of the tent door. It was little pieces of bread. At first, in the Old Testament, they described it as sweet. Sweet wafers. White like snow. And they loved it. And by the end of the Torah, they described it as tasting like old oil and ugly. Because the longer they just took the daily provision, we don't grow in faith waiting on God to do the miraculous. In fact, the opposite actually usually happens. A lot of us are saying, God's going to step in and end this thing. God's going to step in and end this sickness. God's going to step in and decide this election. God's going to step in and fix this problem. The reality is that every time God steps in and drops manna in front of you or parts the Red Sea, we don't become better people. We become more dependent people who are less productive in the promised land. And therefore, when God gets them to the promised land, He dries the manna up. When they cross the Jordan to go into the promised land, they get 3 more days of manna. And at the end of the 3rd day, God dries up the manna because now it's time to start planting crops and living off the land, because I don't want you to live in the need of the miraculous every day. I want you to figure out another way to cross your Red Sea. Sometimes the only way across is for me to step in and part the waters, God says. And that's absolutely true. And I thank God when He does. But how many of you know if every time God stepped in and did it, what would you think the time God didn't step in and do it? You forgot me. What did I do to you, God? And this is what's happened to people. Because they've become manna dependent or Red Sea parting dependent, the first day that God doesn't part the Red Sea, they don't wonder what they need to do. They wonder why God hates them. Why is God mad at me? What's God trying to teach me? And so this is what happened to Israel. Miracle, 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 miracle. It's ridiculous. Deuteronomy chapter 1, 5th book of the Torah. We're almost done. We're at the edge of the Jordan, about to go into the promised land. And Moses opens Deuteronomy 1 and goes, you believe that God hates you. I used to read that and think, how in the world could Israel believe God hates them? Because Moses knew what happens to people who live in Red Sea experiences. The first time they don't get a Red Sea experience, they wonder what's wrong. And so I believe that God is not waiting. We're not waiting in this hour for God to come in and part the waters with all of our stuff. Whether it's the broad social context or the little storm you're in. And yeah, I call yours little because compared to the whole world, yes, what we have is little. What any one of us has is small. It's a storm, but it's ours. I don't believe that it's God's way to only come in and part the waters. I believe there is a way that God wants us to learn to function day to day that is not just sitting and waiting on the miraculous. When Jesus says, let's cross over to the other side, verse 36 says, now when they had left the multitude, they took Him along in the boat as He was, and other little boats were also with Him. Wouldn't you want to be in the one He's in? Yeah, me too. Okay, so we're going to be in the boat with Jesus on this story because you are in the boat with Jesus in your story. Christ in you, the hope of glory. You don't go meet Him at church on Sunday and then get in the boat with Him for a couple hours and then say, hey, I'll meet you next Sunday. If that's the way you're living your Christian life, no wonder you're not living much in your Christian life. Don't leave Jesus at church in His own boat. He's in your boat with you, all right? And a great windstorm arose, and the waves beat into the boat so that it was already filling. But He was in the stern, asleep on a pillow. And they woke Him and said to them, Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing? And He rose and rebuked the wind and said to the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm. And He said to them, why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? How much faith does Jesus say they had? None. Did he still take care of the storm? That teaches me something. This boat ride is not a boat ride dependent on your super faith. You're getting to the other side. Remember what Jesus said? Let us. You're getting to the other side. It's how much sleep do you want to get on the way to the other side?